Okay, so now this video will not repeat verbatim what the other video said with respect to intellectual courage. So just like with intellectual courage, step 4, you had an A, B, C. Step 5 has an A, B, C. The component B for step 5 will not just merely repeat everything that I said for step 4B. Keep in mind that a lot of what I said, generally speaking, about how to apply the concept and how to organize your paragraph and how to format the information and usage of words from the definition and the bullet points applies to this. What I'm going to focus on here instead is I'm going to focus on, helping you think about to what you might apply intellectual empathy. So you already know that, you have to start off with the definition for intellectual empathy, and then you're going to apply the definition, carefully connecting your identified thinking, learning moment, or categories of thinking and learning to the definition you quoted. So for example, you could write a paragraph or two talking about, how you manifested intellectual empathy when doing the reading. And so you could talk about, you could connect how intellectual empathy was necessary for understanding a theory or several theories, but you have to get into some detail. While the paragraph should not be a mere summary of a theory or what was in the reading or what the readings were in general, what you would want to do is, maybe say, you want to name the theories and talk about why intellectual empathy was so important. Maybe name some of the concepts without actually discussing the theory, but you have to provide some details about what was it that you're applying intellectual empathy to. And so a way for you to think about it is, why is intellectual empathy, per the definition and the bullet points in the lesson, why is that a must when you are trying to understand a theory, especially when you consider that the theories that you read about, a lot of them had something, some of the theories have things in common, but a lot of theories have things that contradict each other. So for example, utilitarianism, what does it focus on? Consequences. That's what matters most. Happiness. Well, what about for Kant's duty ethics? So you're trying to understand how many different points of view. You could focus instead on one chapter reading, maybe about a topic that you have strong feelings about. So let's say abortion, and you were reading both sides. Why is intellectual empathy necessary for reading about the debate? And so I'm not trying to give you the answer, I'm trying to prompt you. But you have to come up with lots of detail using, giving context. So if you're going to pick an applied chapter from the reading, if you want to focus on one chapter, what was the title of the chapter? What was the debate? What were the different positions or arguments? And then be talking about and embedding how you reflected intellectual empathy in that sense. Or maybe you didn't. Did you skip some arguments? So let's say that you were like, for example, I'm using abortion as an example. Let's say you didn't want to hear about abortion. And so you're like, I'm not going to listen to those arguments. And by the way, that would be a good example for intellectual courage as well. If you thought that your views would somehow, if you perceived a threat or harm to maybe your sacred or religious views or views that you thought might challenge or question you, to hear the other side of the abortion camp, and vice versa, of course. So those are some examples of how you can use the reading. Another way that you could talk about intellectual empathy or failing to reflect it is with the discussion boards. So when you were doing your peer response thread, so a question to help you think of how to develop this answer would be, how did you use intellectual empathy to understand where your peers were coming from? How would you rate yourself? Did you always reflect intellectual empathy? Were you always aware of it? Were you not, do you think that you strengthened your intellectual empathy with each new discussion board, each time you responded to a peer? Now, obviously, if you did not participate in any of the discussion boards because you never got a topic response accepted, or you never submitted one, or combinations, you never participated in the discussion board, then you can't really talk about that. But if you do talk about that, again, what did you have to do prior to discussion board? So go to the syllabus. What did you have to do to prepare to get accepted to a discussion board? Just a sentence or two. What were some of the discussion board topics about? So, you want to give details. So you can look at that. What kinds of questions and topics were covered in those discussion boards? And then what kind of responses did you come across? Which did any, what did you learn? So that'd be another way of showing that you express intellectual empathy, talking about how expressing it led you to understand. Hold on, I'm getting a phone call. Telemarketers, people. So I'm giving you some understanding there. Now, if you were in class, if you were in class and you were here for the extra credit session, Thursday or Friday of week 13, when I had you listen to a peer, in fact, you listened to 2 peers for extra credit, you could talk about reflecting intellectual empathy there. And a question that will help you to assess how well you do with the intellectual empathy is you can talk about, to what extent would you say that how difficult was it for you to express intellectual empathy? How successful were you in expressing intellectual empathy in terms of listening to your peers' point of view? So remember, I had you guys read your responses, one of your responses for the last unit when it came to looting, whether it was looting a Target store or Barry McCary tolerating looting of his own business. So to help you set up and assess your intellectual empathy, do you think it was easy for you to reflect? Was it difficult for you to reflect? Did you have to constantly remind yourself? Did it get easier? And then, of course, you want to mention like, okay, so which topic were you guys focused on? Because not everybody focused on the same topic. I had one section or one period focus on the Target looting and another section or period focus on the Barry McCary scenario. So then, of course, you want to say, well, what was the what were you sharing? Was it an argument? Was it an essay? Was it a paper? Was it a presentation? What was the topic? What were the arguments for? What were the possible conclusions? What views did you hear? And then why? And of course, you're not summarizing everything. The main point is not necessarily the information that was shared. You're just giving the gist, enough information about the topic that you were listening to per your views, opinions, to really help me see that you were reflecting intellectual empathy, or that you were challenged in reflecting intellectual empathy, easy, hard, got better over time. And by the way, with the intellectual virtues, you can also talk about them in that way. So not only how you manifested or failed to reflect it within a specific assignment or within a category of assignments, but you can also talk about, you can rate and assess yourself in terms of, how easy was it for you to do? Did it seem to come naturally, like it's just a part of who you are? Or was it challenging? Was it very difficult? So that's kind of like we did in the extra credit class. I had you rate yourself from 1 to 5. 1 was like, it was very difficult for me to manifest this virtue. 5 is, hey, I rocked it. That means it comes easily. It's like natural. It's like breathing to me. And by the way, so no, I don't want to get into that. Sorry, I'm censoring myself. So another question to think about, if you want to use the single instance of being in the classroom and listening to the viewpoints of your peers, why was intellectual empathy important for you to be able to fill out the form that you filled out, right? Why was that a must? Why would it have been impossible for you to fill out the form? And then one thing I want you to think about is on the form, it said that after you listened to your peers' views and after you read your view to your peer, it said that you guys had to jointly discuss how your views compare and contrast. So think about the role of intellectual empathy there. How well did you do there? So there are 2 really good instances that you can talk about if you came to class and you listened to a peer's view. Is 1, how easy or hard was it to reflect intellectual empathy? Were you able to see where they were coming from, blah, 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 when you were listening to your peers? And then secondly, how easy or hard was it when you were jointly discussing how they compare and contrast, and why was it vital that you reflect intellectual empathy in doing so? Okay, so I've given you some more information on how you can apply an intellectual virtue, but I've also given you specific help on what you can focus on with respect to intellectual empathy.